Welcome back to our channel. Think a dime is just 10 cents? A 1975 San Francisco proof dime, missing its mint mark, just sold for over $500,000. Even modern Roosevelt dimes like a 1968 No-S proof have fetched $40,000 plus. Found a strange-looking dime? Stop and check. It could be your next treasure. In 1969, America was in a state of transition. The country was watching the moon landing with bated breath. Young people marched for civil rights and against war. In the quiet corners of the United States Mint, machines kept striking coins with unceasing rhythm. Among these, the humble Roosevelt dime continued its regular journey. 10-cent pieces bearing the face of a beloved president and minted in high volume to meet the demands of an economy teeming with daily transactions. For collectors, the year didn't promise anything remarkable in the dime series. The design hadn't changed since 1946. The coin was clad now, no longer struck in silver, and aside from the usual minor flaws, there were no expectations of unusual production deviations. But sometimes rarity hides in routine. And sometimes it takes years before a mistake finds the right eyes. Allison was a lifelong collector, the kind who inherited the hobby from her father and had spent decades filling albums, organizing sets, and scanning through thousands of coins with steady hands and patient focus. She had a special fondness for dimes, small, overlooked, yet rich in variety and history. In 1997, at a community estate sale in a quiet New England town, she purchased a modest box of coins from a man who had cleared out his late father's attic. There were rolls of pennies, nickels, and a small collection of dimes sorted by date. Nothing seemed unusual at first glance. But tucked near the bottom of the box, wrapped in aging paper, was a 1969 dime that looked different. Under normal light, it had a sharp strike and a surprisingly full luster. But what caught her eye was the lettering. The inscriptions, "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," appeared unnaturally thick. There was a kind of shadowing effect, a doubling that couldn't be explained by wear or circulation. Allison brought out her magnifying glass and studied it further. Every letter seemed to have a twin. The date, too, showed a distinct doubling, especially on the 1, 9, and 6. It didn't appear to be mechanical doubling. This looked like the result of a double die. Her heart skipped. She had never seen a 1969 dime with a double die obverse before. Could it be a variety no one had yet cataloged? She compared it to other known double dies from the Lincoln series, particularly the famous 1969 S-cent that had fetched tens of thousands at auction. There were similarities, the boldness, the clarity, the dramatic spread, and the lettering. But this was on a dime, and as far as she knew, no such error had been publicly verified for this denomination in year. Weeks passed as she consulted experts. She sent high-resolution images to prominent numismatists. Some dismissed it as insignificant at first, but one well-known error coin specialist asked to examine it in person. After a thorough analysis, he confirmed what she had come to suspect. This was a true double die obverse on a 1969 dime. It was possibly the first of its kind ever authenticated. Certification followed swiftly. A top-tier grading agency encapsulated the coin and assigned it the label that would change its fate: 1969 10C double die obverse FS 101 MS65. With that, the coin transformed from a simple estate sale find into a certified rarity. Collectors were initially skeptical. How had such an error remained unknown for so long? But the coin's details didn't lie. The doubling was undeniable, the strike was crisp, and the preservation was excellent. As word spread, interest in 1969 dimes grew overnight. What made Allison's find so extraordinary was not just the rarity of the error. It was the fact that no other examples had surfaced in decades of collecting. It wasn't just scarce, it was nearly unique. Auction houses and private collectors began contacting her with offers. The first public sale of a similar variety, found later in a Pennsylvania coin shop, went for over $38,000. Another, graded slightly higher, reached $$56,000. By the early 2000s, the coin had taken on near-mythic status among error collectors. And then came the twist. In 2011, a man in Arizona brought a jar of old change to a coin dealer. Among the coins was another 1969 dime, and upon close inspection, it displayed the same doubling as Allison's. It was the third known example. Within days, news spread through collector circles, and bids began pouring in before it had even gone to auction. That sale changed everything. The coin sold for an astonishing $88,000, and suddenly, the 1969 double dime wasn't just a curiosity. It was a prize, with only a handful of examples known, and each one commanding higher prices than the last. The value of the coin surged. By 2020, an MS-66 specimen set a record, selling for over $142,000 at a major auction house. Collectors now scoured their change, scrutinized coin rolls, and revisited old albums, hoping to stumble across one of the few remaining unrecognized specimens. The coin's physical attributes remain unmistakable once you know what to look for. The bold doubling on Liberty, the distinct shadowing on I in God We Trust, and the split date digits are all strong indicators of the double die obverse. The reverse of the coin, by contrast, is perfectly normal, which makes the obverse stand out even more dramatically. Some theories suggest the error may have originated from a misaligned hubbing process during die creation, likely involving a second hubbing that was not properly registered. Whatever the origin, its brief production run ensured that only a tiny number made it into circulation. Today, the 1969 US one-dime coin with the double die obverse is a ghost in the world of coinage, known by few, seen by fewer, and possessed by almost none. The value of this exceptional rarity now rests between $65,000 and $142,000, depending on grade and eye appeal, making it one of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever discovered and a stunning example of how history can live in the smallest places, waiting patiently to be found. In 1984, the hum of coin presses filled the U.S. Mint facilities with their familiar rhythm. Every day, millions of Roosevelt dimes rolled off the dies, small yet indispensable pieces of the American economy. For most, these dimes were forgettable, tossed into pockets, handed across counters, dropped into vending machines without a thought. The Roosevelt design had been unchanged for decades, its silver composition long replaced with copper-nickel cladding. Few collectors paid any special attention to 1984 dimes. The year passed without fanfare, and the coins quietly found their way into circulation alongside countless others. It would take nearly 15 years for anyone to notice what had slipped through that year. Richard was a collector with a quiet obsession. A former postal worker from Ohio, he'd spent evenings at his kitchen table, sorting through bags of coins he picked up from local banks. His family sometimes teased him for his dedication, but Richard never minded. To him, there was something meditative about inspecting coins one by one, looking for those hidden details most people never notice. In 1999, while hunting through a bag of mixed dimes, he spotted something strange. A 1984 dime glimmered under the lamp, but its details seemed off. The face of Roosevelt looked softer than usual, but not from where. There was a ghost-like doubling along the words Liberty and I in God We Trust. The date itself, 1984, seemed to have a faint shadow behind the numbers. Richard froze. He'd seen mechanical doubling before. Cheap, common, and unimpressive. But this looked different. The doubling was strong, deliberate, almost artistic. He fetched his loupe and examined it more closely, his heart rate climbing. The spread was wide and clear, particularly on the word Liberty, where the letters almost looked like they'd been struck twice, but perfectly aligned. He didn't sleep much that night. He dug out his guides and references, searching for any mention of a double die on a 1984 dime. Nothing. He even checked back issues of numismatic journals, hoping to find someone else who had noticed the same thing. Still nothing. Over the next few months, Richard brought the coin to dealers and shows, seeking second opinions. Some dismissed it as unimportant, but a few took a longer look. One older dealer at a regional coin show in Chicago stopped mid-conversation when Richard handed him the dime. After a moment, he looked up with narrowed eyes and said quietly, "You may have something very special here." The dealer recommended sending the coin to a grading service for authentication. Richard hesitated. He'd never submitted a coin before, but the curiosity was unbearable. He packed the dime carefully and shipped it off, waiting weeks for an answer. When the package returned, Richard held his breath as he cracked the seal and read the label inside. 1984 10C double die obverse FS 101 MS 64. His hands trembled. This was a major variety, one that had apparently gone unnoticed for years, possibly even the first certified example of its kind. Word began to spread among era collectors, and soon articles started appearing in numismatic publications, introducing the 1984 double die dime to a fascinated audience. As more collectors became aware of the variety, others began searching their collections and bankrolls. Slowly, a handful of additional examples surfaced, though always in well-worn condition, none approaching the sharpness of Richard's original find. This only added to the allure of the coin. Auction houses began to take notice. The first public sale of a certified 1984 double die dime took place in 2003, where a specimen in 55 Australian dollars sold for just over $12,000. Stunning at the time for a modern clad dime. But the buzz had only just begun. By 2008, another example in MS63 fetched more than $28,000. A few years later, as collectors battled for higher grade pieces, the price climbed again. The most exciting moment came in 2017 when a beautifully preserved MS65 specimen crossed the auction block. Spirited bidding pushed the final hammer price to over $102,000, a record for the variety and a moment of vindication for those who had long believed in its significance. Even today, the exact cause of the error remains the subject of debate. Some experts suspect a misalignment during the die hubbing process, producing a second impression slightly off-center on the obverse die. Whatever the cause, the result was a coin with striking visual doubling on key design elements. Liberty stands out with thick, shadowed letters, while I In God We Trust shows a clear split on several characters. The date, too, is bold and doubled enough to catch the eye under magnification. The reverse, interestingly, shows no sign of doubling, adding to the mystery and rarity of the variety. Collectors now scour 1984 dime rolls and bags in the hope of uncovering another survivor. Only a few dozen examples have been certified, making it one of the rarest modern Roosevelt dime varieties known. From a forgotten detail struck in a year of routine production, the 1984 US 1 dime coin with a double die obverse has grown into a prized treasure, commanding between $40,000 and $122,000, depending on its grade and condition. Proof that even the smallest coins can carry stories of extraordinary value. The year was 2004, and at the U.S. Mint, the presses ran as tirelessly as ever. Billions of coins clinked into waiting bins, including Roosevelt dimes, struck in their familiar copper-nickel alloy, gleaming with their crisp, decades-old design. The Roosevelt dime, unchanged since 1946, hardly caught anyone's attention anymore. For most Americans, it was little more than a sliver of metal to feed a parking meter or drop into a charity jar. Yet on that unassuming year, buried in the torrent of ordinary coins, something extraordinary happened. IT would take years before anyone noticed. Meredith had been a coin collector since her father passed down a small tin of wheat cents to her as a girl. Now in her 30s, she kept the habit alive, combing through change, visiting shows, trading stories with other enthusiasts. One spring afternoon in 2010, she stopped by her local bank and asked for $300 in dimes, something she'd done countless times before. That evening, she poured the coins into neat piles on her dining room table and began her quiet ritual of searching. Tea first. Nothing stood out. She flipped each dime under her magnifier, scanning the date, the mint mark, the usual hallmarks of known errors. And then she froze. .1 2004 dime gleamed differently, not in its shine, but in its details. She leaned closer. The word Liberty on the obverse looked strange, almost as if it had been struck twice. The letters showed thick, clear doubling, bold enough to catch her naked eye. In God We Trust displayed the same strange effect, each character split ever so slightly. The date, 2004, also bore the unmistakable shadows of an accidental second impression that Meredith's breath caught. She set the coin down, heart beating fast, and pulled out her loupe to confirm what she thought she saw. This wasn't mechanical doubling, that flat, shelf-like effect that sometimes tricked beginners. This was sharp, distinct, true doubling, a double die. For a moment, she doubted herself. Surely, if there were a major double die variety for the 2004 dime, someone else would have found already. She rummaged through her guidebooks. Nothing. No mention of a double die obverse for that year. Online forums turned up nothing definitive either. Curiosity turned to determination. At the next coin show she attended, she showed the dime to a veteran dealer. He examined it under his own scope and gave her a look she'd never forget. A mixture of surprise, respect, and just a touch of envy. "Where did you find this?" he asked, almost accusingly. She explained. "You may have something big here," he murmured, handing the coin back with a grin. "Send it in. Get it certified." It took weeks, but when the envelope finally arrived from the grading service, Meredith's hands trembled as she opened it. There it was, slabbed and labeled. 2004 10C double die obverse FS 101 MS63. In the world of modern coins, discoveries like this were rare. For Roosevelt dimes, major double die varieties were few and far between. And this one, it seemed, was the first significant error of its kind for 2004 that word began to spread. Articles appeared in hobby magazines. Collectors started scrutinizing their own 2004 dimes, and a few more examples surfaced in circulated condition, confirming the error wasn't unique, though still incredibly scarce. By the time the first one crossed an auction block in 2013, the whispers had become a buzz. That specimen, graded 58 Australian dollars, brought in nearly $17,000. The next, in 2015, fared better, an MS64 hammer for just shy of $28,000. But the real turning point came 2 years later, when an MS65 example sparked a fierce bidding war, ultimately selling for over $80,000. Proof that collectors were taking notice and taking the variety seriously. Over the next few years, the story of the 2004 double die dime took on a life of its own. It became a symbol of how even the most routine, unremarkable coinage could still harbor secrets. It fueled a renewed interest in searching through bank rolls and change jars, inspiring countless collectors to look just a little closer at their coins. The error itself remains a subject of fascination. Experts believe it occurred during the hubbing process, when the working die received two impressions slightly misaligned, creating strong doubling on the obverse. The effect is most prominent on Liberty, where the letters seem to stand in shadow, and on the motto, "In God We Trust," where the doubled edges give the words a ghostly depth. The date, too, shows crisp doubling, a telltale sign that distinguishes it from more common forms of mechanical doubling. Interestingly, no doubling appears on the reverse, which remains perfectly normal. This clear, one-sided error adds to its appeal, proof of a die-specific mistake, not a more systemic problem. Today, the 2004 double die dime has earned its place among the most sought-after modern errors. Collectors hunt tirelessly for high-grade examples, though most of those found show signs of circulation. Only a handful in mint state have been certified, driving their value even higher. From the quiet clink of a mint press in 2004 to the hands of a determined collector years later, the 2004 US 1 dime, with a double die obverse, has become a modern treasure, commanding prices at auction that now range from $30,000 to as high as $112,000, depending on grade. A reminder that even the smallest coin can hide a story worth far more than its face value. The presses at the United States, mint never paused in 2007. Tens of millions of Roosevelt dimes rolled off the dies that year, their copper-nickel composition gleaming under factory lights before tumbling into bags destined for banks and businesses. The Roosevelt dime had long since become an unchanging fixture of American coinage, with its design steady since 1946. In the minds of most, it was little more than spare change, unworthy of a second glance. Yet buried in that year's massive output, unnoticed by inspectors and undetected by the public, was one particular mistake destined to write a very different story. Years later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, a collector named Eric stopped by a flea market outside Chicago. Eric wasn't a professional dealer or even particularly wealthy, but his love of coins ran deep. He'd always believed that treasures still circulated in ordinary pockets and change jars, and he had the patience to look for them. At a dusty vendor table near the edge of the lot, a cardboard box full of loose coins caught his eye. For a few dollars, the vendor let him sift through the pile. Most of what he found was exactly what he expected: circulated quarters, worn nickels, tarnished pennies. But then, a gleaming dime with a 2007 date slipped between his fingers. Even before he held it up to the light, something about it didn't feel quite right. The letters on Liberty seemed thicker somehow. Under his loupe, the word "I in God we trust" revealed itself as jagged and doubled, each character echoing itself with razor-sharp clarity. Even the date, 2007, bore what looked like a shadowy twin impression that Eric's pulse quickened. He'd seen mechanical doubling before, that flat, lifeless smearing that tricks beginners, but this was something different. This had depth. It had definition. And it was on a coin from a year that he couldn't remember seeing listed in any guidebook for double dies. He bought the whole box on the spot, though his mind was already fixated on that one coin. That night, he scoured his library and the internet, looking for confirmation. Nothing definitive turned up. It seemed nobody had publicly reported a double die for a 2007 dime. Not yet. His next stop was a trusted coin shop he'd frequented for years. The owner, an old gentleman named Arthur, peered at the dime under his microscope, eyebrows arching higher the longer he examined it. Well, Arthur muttered, finally looking up. "That's no machine doubling. You've got yourself a double die, my friend, and a bold one at that. You send this in for certification right away. Don't wait." The wait was excruciating. Weeks dragged on before the coin finally returned from the grading service, sealed in a slab, bearing a label that confirmed what Eric already knew. 2007 10C double die obverse FS 101 MS62. The news sent ripples through the collecting community. Here was a previously unknown error variety, bold and unmistakable, hiding in plain sight for years. Soon, word spread through forums and newsletters. Collectors began pouring through their own 2007 dimes, searching for more examples. A handful turned up, but it became clear very quickly just how rare this mistake really was. When Eric's coin appeared at auction in 2013, speculation ran high. Some thought it might bring a few $1,000s at best. But the bidding was fierce, climbing past $15,000 before finally hammering at nearly $22,000. That sale set the tone. In 2016, another high-grade specimen crossed the block, this time fetching almost $34,000. But the real shock came in 2019, when a mint-state example graded MS64 drew national attention by soaring past $90,000 at auction. Collectors, now fully aware of just how few high-grade examples existed, pushed the price higher and higher. The error itself remains a fascinating case study in minting mishaps. Somewhere in the hubbing process, a working die received a second, slightly misaligned impression, creating sharp doubling on the obverse. Liberty shows the strongest evidence, with doubled strokes on nearly every letter. In God We Trust reveals the same phenomenon. Each letter thickened and shadowed. Even the date, 2007, bears telltale doubling, especially around the curves of the sevens and the one. Curiously, no signs of doubling appear on the reverse. That clean, flawless torch design on the back only serves to emphasize the stunning error on the front. Collectors appreciate the clarity of the mistake, an unmistakable double die rather than a softer, more common mechanical illusion. The story of the 2007 double die dime has since become one of perseverance and sharp eyes. It's a story that reminds collectors of what drives them to keep looking through jars of change, to comb flea markets and estate sales, to examine even the smallest coins under magnification. For Eric, the journey from flea market to auction hall changed not only his collection, but also his outlook. His find inspired others to keep searching, knowing that extraordinary things still hide among the ordinary. Today, the 2007 US 1 dime with a double die obverse stands as one of the most coveted modern errors, a true rarity of its era. At auction, examples have commanded between $28,000 and as much as $106,000 depending on grade. A tiny reminder that in the world of coins, even the smallest piece of change can hold a story worth telling, and a value worth far more than its face.